I'll go back. So one of our people who got interested was Chevron Texaco, and they came to us and they said, that's nice, but actually Harry's design here was to accommodate up to 200 time points and 10,000 stocks or genes, 10,000 wiggly lines. And he accomplished that, and his PhD has a very important set of contributions about the design, but also the algorithms underneath it that allow that to happen with such, rapid display speed. And those ideas are transferred and been copied by others and put to work. So Chevron Texaco said 200 time points is good, but we're looking at oil well data. And we have, for all of our oil, 10,000 oil wells, we measure the pressure and temperature at the top, at the middle, and the bottom every 10 seconds for a year. And we've never seen our data. Can you do more than 200 time points? We said, okay, we'll try for 10,000 time points. Remember, the screen width is only about 1,000 points, but we're trying to get 10,000 data points to show. And that takes a little work. So we do it with an overview first. This is some weather data, 5 years of weather data, so it's about 10,000 to 1,500 or 1,600, I guess 1,800 time points. But you can see this is sunlight data for a series of cities, and you can see the seasonal pattern. So the overview tells you something immediately. This detail box, this focuses on a 2-month period, and that's expanded over here. So that's the 2-month period from August 30th to October 30th. And it shows you some of those points. Then you can select a pattern that interests you. So this is a pattern that has 2 cloudy days, no sunlight, and 7 sunny days in between. And this researcher was interested in finding that kind of pattern. And it finds it, the tool shows you where they are by putting these little rectangles, and you can then go look for those particular points in time when the pattern, which has a shape that interests you, is a pattern. Okay? So we became very much concerned about what are the shapes and patterns in temporal data that you would be interested in finding, and we built lots of tools to do. We were also interested in temporal data that was categorical data. Instead of a stock market value that goes up and down, you might have a person's medical history, and this is 3 years out of a 100-year patient history. Our design was a 100-year patient history, but this patient had a series of doctor visits, hospitalizations, and then they had lab tests, and they had medications. This line shows today. Patient is pregnant, forecast to be pregnant for another 2 months, had a sonogram. You click on the sonogram, you see the sonogram, and I hope you see the fetus over there, and poor resolution here. Click on the blood test, you see the blood test, click on the x-ray, you see the x-ray, click on the EKG, you see. So it's kind of a menu with 10,000 items. You zoom in, and actually, this works on our website, and this patient was diagnosed as being diabetic, given insulin, a larger dose of insulin, and Lasix apparently to counteract the side effects of the higher dose of insulin. So you get a real overview, and then you can see things. I mean, I love this slide. This patient is a good patient, has gotten pap smear every year, but she had a mammogram regularly, and then she didn't have one for a long time. She hasn't had one for about 5 years. So one of the hard things to spot is the absence of something. And statistical tools rarely tell you about the absence of something, but visualization, if your mind and your eyes are tuned to it, you'll spot the absence of mammograms over a time period. Okay? So this takes a little bit of training of your mind and your eye, but you will spot the regularity of these pap smears and then mammograms. And then we do have a rich control panel that lets you change the layout to be able to see these patterns a little easier, to compact the display to get it all in at once. And I don't know, maybe I'll show, if we have time later, we could take a look at the actual working system here. About half medical systems out there now have some derivative of this. Some of them acknowledge our leading the way with it, others just made their own versions. But the idea of having this compact overview has become, I hope, is becoming more widely. One patient's nice, but 1 million patients would be better. So our next effort was, for many years, David Wang's PhD dissertation, was to look at medical history by considering each of these strips is now one patient, and each of these triangles is an event in that patient's history. There are many medical events. I do have a 4-minute video, and I think I'm going to go do it and let the video speak for itself. And let's do that. And we'll take a little break and we'll go a little further, but then we'll get to a break. So, come on. Oh, I didn't hook up the sound for you. Okay. Should have thought about that. We don't have sound here, do we? Okay. I'll narrate. So you get to see each of these stripes is a patient. It's over a 20-year period from 1990 to 2010. And we were just focused on one part of the story, is the patients who received an injection of radiology contrast. There were 3,598 of those patients out of these million patients. We extracted those, almost 4,000 cases. And then each one of them, we were interested in the time they were given, because they had some kidney problems, they were given an injection of radiology contrast and then got an X-ray to see about blood circulation in the kidneys. Unfortunately, about 7% and so you can, of the patients have some adverse response to this injection. And so we were interested not in all their other history, but just creatinine high, creatinine normal, and creatinine low. Creatinine high is an indicator of problems in their kidney functions. Okay? And so what we are now going to do is look for all the patients that had high creatinine. And look how many there are. Some of these had many, many, many high creatinine. Very severe cases, in fact, chronically severe. And so they are a bit of a problem, and we have to remove them to be able to look for those who suffered that high creatinine because of the radiology contrast. Clearly, if they had high creatinine before, then that radiology contrast did not cause it. Okay? So this, again, free for you to download. And I think, let's see, we're going to go through the process of getting rid of the, filtering out the ones who had more than 4 creatinine highs. There we go. And there we go. Change it to a 4. Hope you can see that. And now we'll go to 4. If they had more than 4 before, we're going to get rid of it. So we then, it highlights the ones that have that more than 4 creatinine highs. Now we're going to remove the ones that we found, and we're now down, and we can see the ones who potentially had the creatinine high because of the radiology contrast. We're looking at cause and effect situations. There's another problem, is that some patients, like this, have had 2 radiology contrast injections. So we have to separate out those parts of their history. And this tool, Lifelines 2, enables you to do that. It doubles up each record and gives you a little warning message. And now we've taken care of that. You see some people even had 3 radiology contrast injections. And we're now looking at the distribution of those, of what happened after the radiology contrast in the next 14 days. We select all of those patients who had high contrast, high creatinine within 14 days of their radiology contrast injection. And if we select those, we now keep the selected ones, and we get, finally, we get this group of candidates. These might be the patients we're really worried about. Okay? And then we're going to look for more specifically a sequence of activities. It's very difficult to do in any database query language like SQL or any other tool. And our doctors, we had 8 studies of different projects like this one with 8 physician groups. And it took them a while to understand these principles, but this idea of align, rank, and filter became really their way of thinking about these problems. And they were then able to make a solution to their problem. So we're going to, there's one more. I think it's probably not too important to go further. I think you get there. Any questions about this? Let me stop it. Any questions about this? Have I lost you, or are you with me? All right, it's just, it's a fresh way of thinking. In the past, people could not look at 1 million patient histories, could not filter out and see a pattern that was relevant. So our physicians had problems like they were looking at, and you will see that soon, the bounce back problem. That the patients in the intensive care unit, they're sent home and they come back in a week. There's something wrong, they missed that. Okay? They're looking at patterns of what happens when people receive various treatments. If they get if they had a heart attack, they get a stent, are they back in within a year for another stent? Okay, or they have other problems. So these kind of patterns are what people are after, and it's very hard in current tools to be able to do that. Yeah, thank you.
Is this or things like this integrated into sort of standing electronic medical records?
It's beginning to happen. I'm pleased to report that the Harvard I2B2 system, which is distributed to 40 medical centers, research centers, took Lifelines and put it in there, making it available. It's free. You can download Lifelines 2, we call it, and use it on your data set. We just ran a workshop, I think it was 2 weeks ago, where I was just startled, and it's one of the great pleasures as a researcher. You put something out there, and these people show up that have been using this tool, and this woman from University of Florida, Gigi Lepori, a researcher at University of Florida, was studying the impact or the outcomes for patients who had intrauterine devices. And she said, we had 2,000 patients. I didn't know how to look for I didn't know how to filter them out. She said, I put it into Lifelines 2, click, 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 and I had the 73 patients I was after. And then she drew the medical records and she could do her research project. So those kind of stories are very heartening to a researcher who was producing a generic. Furthermore, Lifelines 2 has now also been integrated into the NIH's BTRIS system. BT, if you want to try, that's in the BTRIS, which is a project that reaches about 600 research groups. As you know, NIH conducts clinical trials, and they've been doing so for 35 years. And there's a huge database of very valuable, accurate scientific data about various medical tests and various histories. And so, NIH realized that they're getting requests to conduct new clinical trials that were the results are really available from the old clinical trials. And so they've made all the clinical trial data available. And when you extract that data, you can download it as a spreadsheet, or you can download it into Lifelines 2. So they've taken the code, and they're now the people running this project. Okay? So NIH, James Chimino is the whoops. Well, it's probably telling me it's time for a break, isn't it? Are we still there? Okay. Okay. Good. We'll take a break. So I want to finish this topic. Let me continue just a little more about our later work. Another student, Chris Wong-Sifasawat, came by and said, hey, I can do better in making an aggregated view that compactly shows you 1 million patients on the screen at once. And this was the strategy he developed. If a patient has one patient history, comes to the emergency room, intensive care unit, intermediate care, goes to the floor, and then exits. So that's the history. Arrives at the hospital, emergency, intensive care unit is the bright orange. I'm sorry, the purple is, okay. And then this is intermediate care, and then they go floor. And the light blue means they were sent home and they lived, okay? Now, so here we're looking at 90 patients. And can you see what happens? They all arrive. They go to the emergency room. 70 out of those 90 go to the emergency room. Okay? And of those, the most common thing is they spend a few hours in the emergency room and then they're sent home alive. Good news. Some of them get the green, which is they're admitted to the hospital, to the floor. And then, on average, they go home after 10 days. Some get a little more trouble. It takes longer, but some die. Okay? Other cases, they go to the emergency room, they go to the intensive care unit, and they die. So you can see the most frequent ones here, and then the less frequent, and then the more rare ones down below. And so, again, they could find the patterns they were after. So that's 90, but here's 7,000 patients at once. And we do recognize that these averages of emergency room and sent home alive, that's about 2/3 of it, has a long distribution. Some are sent home within a few hours, some are stay a day, or some of them have a very long tail out here, which you can't see. So, we can see the average values, but we can then see the distribution of those values. And then we can see other kind of more complicated situations. And if you click on any one of these, you then get the detailed Lifelines view, so you can look at the individual patient histories of what happened to them. And then you can do other little tricks like align by the intensive care. So this is the intensive care. You want to know, how do people get to intensive care? Well, mostly they get there from the emergency room, but a fair number of them get from the floor of a hospital, and some come from the intermediate care. And actually, there's one anomaly. Somebody died first, and then they were brought to the intensive care unit. Something's wrong there in the data. But hospitals, this is actually showing quite a clean situation. Medical record data is disturbingly poor. I guess my most telling story is of the patient who was admitted to the hospital 14 times but discharged only twice. I guess you can understand that the admissions is a billable event, but discharges are not, and so they're not always reported as thoroughly as the admissions. Okay? And there's that. I think I'll take my pause here before we get to trees and networks. So let's take a little stretch and break.